My name is Rachel Marie Jennings, and on the morning of March 14, 2023, I died on my way to work. That morning felt just like any other. I had just dropped my boys, Eli and Jonah, off at school and was sipping my usual vanilla latte, heading toward the law firm where I work as a paralegal. I remember thinking about the week ahead, my dad's doctor appointment, bills due, and whether Jonah had finally started making friends at his new school. I was at a stop sign, checking a message from my supervisor, when suddenly my chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside out. The pain hit me like a freight train. I couldn't catch my breath. My coffee dropped from my hand, spilling across my blouse as my vision blurred and my car slowly veered off the road. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, and then, nothing. But I wasn't gone. Not really. My eyes may have closed, but I found myself hovering above the wreck. I saw the scene with a strange clarity, my own body limp behind the wheel, a small group of people rushing over to help. One woman in a red coat had already dialed 911 and was shouting that I wasn't breathing. I felt no fear, no panic. Just a weight lifted, like I had let go of something I never realized I was carrying. As I drifted further from the scene, I was drawn into this brilliant tunnel of light. It wasn't just bright, it shimmered like stars were dancing along its walls. I didn't walk through it. I was being gently pulled, as if the light itself was guiding me. And then I was somewhere else, though I couldn't tell you where. It wasn't a place I could point to on a map, but I knew instantly it was beyond anything I had ever experienced. It felt limitless, peaceful, and whole. That's when I saw him. Jesus stood before me, not like the pictures in children's Bibles, but more real than anything I had ever known. I didn't need to be told it was him. I just knew. His eyes locked onto mine, and in them, I saw everything I had ever been. All of my flaws, my failures, the selfish things I'd done, yet none of it was met with shame. It was all swallowed in a kind of love I can't even begin to describe. It broke me in the best way. I dropped to my knees, overcome by emotion. He spoke my name, not out loud, but into the very core of who I was. "Rachel," he said. And in that moment, I knew I was home. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but my mouth wouldn't move. Still, he understood me. I thought about my boys, about my husband Mark, and how I wasn't ready to leave them behind. But Jesus looked at me with this calm certainty and said, "That's not why you're here." His voice wasn't like any voice I've ever heard. It didn't come from his mouth. It came from everywhere. It was inside of me and all around me at the same time, and it filled me with a sense of both purpose and peace. Then he reached out his hand. The moment I took it, everything changed. We weren't just standing in this bright, peaceful place anymore. We were looking down over what I somehow knew was America. It wasn't a map, but I could see the whole country at once. There were lights scattered everywhere across the land. Jesus looked out at it all and said, "These lights are my people." I could see them glowing at first, bright and alive, but then slowly they began to dim. The dimming started subtly, like a flame flickering in the wind, but then it accelerated. Some lights blinked out completely. My heart ached as I watched it happen. I turned to Jesus and asked, "Why are they going out?" He looked at me, not with anger but with a deep sadness, and said, "They are choosing comfort over truth. They want easy roads instead of the right ones." Then I began to see what he meant. I saw empty churches, doors locked, sanctuaries that once held praise now filled with silence. I saw families torn apart, yelling at each other in their homes, Bibles thrown into storage bins, gathering dust. I saw kids sitting alone, hypnotized by screens while their parents scrolled endlessly on their phones, completely detached. The world looked busy, but completely hollow. And Jesus said, "This is where they are now, but I will show you where they are going." The next thing I saw was unlike anything I'd ever imagined. It wasn't some symbolic vision or abstract dream. It was real, so real it felt like I was standing in the middle of it. Cities were burning. I could see fires in places that looked like New York, Chicago, maybe even Atlanta. People were screaming, looting stores that had already been stripped bare. Grocery shelves were empty, windows shattered. But what shook me wasn't the destruction, it was the desperation. These weren't criminals or radicals. They were regular people. Moms with children, old men in work boots, young couples crying in the streets, not knowing where to turn. I turned to Jesus again, my voice shaking as I asked, "When is this going to happen?" He looked at me with eyes that held both sorrow and love and said, "Sooner than they think." Then the scene shifted again. I saw someone I recognized. It was President Trump, but he looked older, worn down, almost burdened. He stood behind a podium, head bowed, and behind him was a massive map of the US, divided into several colored zones. Jesus spoke again, "Many have placed their hope in leaders, but salvation does not come through politics or power." Then I saw Trump again, this time in a dimly lit room, seated with several other men around a table. They were whispering, shaking hands, passing papers. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I felt it in my spirit. Deals were being made that had nothing to do with the will of God. Jesus said, "Even those who speak my name often serve other masters." I felt a coldness then, not from him, but from the reality of what I was seeing. Then came the natural disasters. I saw hurricanes slamming into both coasts. I saw earthquakes in places that have never had them before, land cracking open, people running for cover. I saw sickness spreading through cities like wildfire. There were hospitals overflowing, people lying on floors, children crying out for their parents. And then came the economic collapse. I saw news tickers filled with red numbers, investors panicking, banks closing their doors, people crying outside ATM machines because there was nothing left to take out. Life as we knew it had unraveled completely. But what hit me the hardest wasn't the disasters. It was what came after them. I saw people turning on each other, not just strangers, but neighbors, families, even best friends. I saw houses vandalized, people screaming through broken windows, accusing each other of hoarding, betrayal, and things I couldn't even understand. Love had gone cold. The fear was so deep it had replaced compassion. It was like the very soul of the country had cracked, and no one remembered how to care for one another. I asked Jesus, "Is this really going to happen? Can it be stopped?" His gaze locked on mine, and there was so much sorrow in his eyes, but also something else, hope. "This is the path they are on," he said softly, "but paths can change. That's why you're seeing this." And just as quickly as the darkness had flooded my vision, I began to see flickers of light again. Small at first, barely visible, but slowly growing brighter. These weren't big churches or stadiums full of worshipers. These were people gathered in homes, kitchens, basements. They were praying, feeding one another, caring for the sick, opening their doors to strangers. There was no production, no performance, just real love, the kind Jesus had always meant for us to live by. He turned to me and said, "My true followers will not be found in the places the world expects. They will be the ones who love quietly, serve faithfully, and prepare not just for their sake, but for others." I looked closer and saw people I recognized. My neighbor, Mr. Donnelly, the one who never smiled, was cooking meals for an entire street of hungry people. My co-worker, Brittany, who never spoke about God at all, was holding a child and praying with tears streaming down her face. Jesus whispered, "The darkness will come, but it will not overcome the light." Then he brought me closer, to places that looked a lot like home. I saw my own street, my own front porch. I saw my husband, Mark, sitting at the edge of our bed, head in his hands, shaking. I saw Eli and Jonah curled up on the couch, wrapped in one of my sweaters, their faces pale and scared. Watching them like that crushed me in a way I can't explain. I reached for them, crying out, "I'm right here." But Jesus gently said, "They can't hear you. Not yet. I turned to him, tears pouring down my face, and said, "Please don't send me back. I don't want to leave you." I can't describe the love I felt in that moment. It was more than peace. It was home, it was perfect, and it filled every broken place in me I didn't even know existed. But he looked at me with such compassion and said, "I'm always with you, even when you don't feel me. But your work isn't done yet." He placed his hand on my head, and I felt something like fire and water pouring over me all at once. Something pure, something eternal. "Tell them what you've seen," he said. "Wake them up. Time is shorter than they know." And then everything began to fade. His face was the last thing I saw before the pain came rushing back in. My chest felt like it was being crushed again. I heard machines beeping, nurses shouting. There were lights overhead, and someone yelled, "We've got a pulse." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, but I knew I was back. Later, the doctor told me I had been clinically dead for just over 4 minutes. He said it was a miracle I even made it to the hospital, let alone survived. When I was finally able to speak again, I told Mark everything. Every single detail, the light, the vision of America, the words Jesus spoke to me. He didn't look at me like I was crazy. He just held my hand, his eyes full of tears, and said, "I believe you." He told me he had prayed harder in those minutes than he had in his entire life, begging God not to take me. It's been months since that day, but not a moment goes by that I don't think about what I saw, what I felt. And the more time passes, the more I see the pieces of that vision already unfolding right in front of us. The anger, the division, the disasters, none of it feels far away anymore. It's here. The world is changing, and not for the better. But I also remember what Jesus showed me near the end, those small lights, flickering back to life. I believe we are meant to be those lights. Not just surviving, but shining. Preparing not out of fear, but out of love, for our families, our neighbors, even strangers. This isn't about politics or religion. It's about waking up to what really matters before it's too late. The time for playing church is over. We need to actually live what we say we believe. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a prophet. I'm just Rachel Jennings, a mom, a wife, someone who died on a Tuesday morning and was sent back with a message. And if you're still watching this, maybe that message was meant for you too. Maybe you're one of the lights Jesus showed me. I can't tell you what to do next, but I can tell you this. Now is the time to decide which path you're on, because one leads to destruction, and the other, though narrow, is lit by the kind of love that can still change everything. If this testimony stirred something in your heart, don't ignore it. Share this video with someone you love. Leave a comment if you've had a similar experience. And most importantly, turn to Jesus while there's still time. He's real. He loves you. And He's waiting.